All right, Precalc, one thing we did not talk about is eccentricity. So I'm going to write that up here, and we're going to go over a hard one, making sure I'm spelling this right. Eccentricity. Eccentricity is equal to the C over A, and remember the foci is where we get the C over A. So I actually didn't write that here. The foci is A squared, minus B squared equals C squared. So I'll write it up here again. A squared minus B squared equals C squared, where C is the distance of the center to the foci. So let's try another problem. I'm going to go right here to example 3. Example 3, we have a lot of completing the square, and there's a lot to this one. So the first thing I'm going to do is write it up here because I don't like where I was getting the options. So example 3 says 16x squared plus 25y squared minus 32x minus 50y plus 16 is equal to 0. The first thing I need to do is put the x's together, the y's together, and get rid of the constant. 16x squared minus 32x plus 25y squared minus 50y equals negative 16. Now, in order to complete the square, I have to factor those terms out. So we have 16 times x squared minus 2x, let's complete the square, plus 25 times y squared minus 2y, we're going to complete the square, is equal to negative 16. And don't forget, we have to add both of our completing the squares. Let's talk about completing the square. Half of negative 2 is 1. 1 squared is 1. But I didn't really add 1 because that 16 I pulled out, I really added 16. So 16 times 1. Half the middle term, negative 2, is negative 1. 1 squared is 1. Again, I didn't really add 1. I added 1 times 25, which is 25. So I do notice that those cancel out. And I get 16 times x minus 1 quantity squared plus 25 times y minus 1 quantity squared is equal to 25. You know what would be really lovely is if when I divided to make it equal to 1, if this x term really worked out. But it doesn't. So I know these cancel out. We know these cancel out to be 1. And we get this mess of 16x minus 1 quantity squared over 25, and we'll talk about that in a second, plus y minus 1 quantity squared. I'm going to put that over 1 just so I see it. Now, this 16 over 25 throws a lot of people off. Okay, but remember if I was to take 1, and if I was to divide by a fraction, I would really multiply by the reciprocal. So all I have to do is flip this, x minus 1 squared, and notice right now this is 16 over 25, so I'm just going to flip that as 25 over 16, plus y minus 1 squared over 1 equals 1. And to make it even clearer, in our curriculum, sometimes they actually don't show us the a squared. What they actually do is they show us the numbers. So they'd show us this as x minus 1 quantity squared over 5/4 squared, plus y minus 1 quantity squared over 1 is equal to 1. So let's graph this first. I know that I'm going to graph at positive 1, positive 1. I know under the y, on the y, I'm going to go up 1 and down 1. And I know at the x, I'm going to go to the right 1 1/4. Well, that's like here. And to the left 1 1/4. So the first thing, we're graphed it. Not a very good steady hand. Let me try that again. Graph my ellipse. Still not a steady hand, but that is okay. We do need to name the center. The center is at 1, 1. We got that. We do need to name the foci. So remember the foci is a squared minus b squared. Okay, foci is a squared minus b squared is equal to c squared, where c is the distance. So I'm taking 25 over 16 minus 1, and that's going to give me the c squared. Well, 25 over 16 minus 16 over 16, yes, you could do this in a calculator, is 9 over 16, which is c squared. So c is 3/4. So if I go 3/4 this way and 3/4 this way, I can find the foci. So let's name those points. I know if I go 3/4 to the right, that's 1 3/4. And 1, that's one of the points of the foci. And if I go to the left, 3/4, that's just at 1/4. All right, yes, I could call that 7 over 4 as well. The vertices are these points right here on the major axis. So the vertices, we actually named all of them today. You don't need the ones on the minor axis unless they ask specifically. The vertices are on the major axis. So remember that was at 2 1/4. Yes, I can name that 9 over 4 and 1. And remember this one was at -1/4 and 1. The only thing we didn't talk about is that eccentricity. So remember the eccentricity is C. Well, I know C is 3 over 4 over A. Well, C over A is 3 over 4 divided by, that was my A, 5 over 4. When I divide, I multiply by the reciprocal, so my eccentricity is 3/5. Eccentricity is a way to measure the ovalness of an ellipse. So that is what eccentricity is. Okay, it's to measure the ovalness of an ellipse.